Wife catches me cheating with her best friend. John knew that his wife Carol was going to kill him. A memory of the previous day flashed through his mind. He had gone to the airport to pick Carol up and arrived just in time. He stood there, angry that he couldn't have a smoke, and suddenly looked up. There stood Sandy. Sandy and her husband Darren lived several hundred miles away from him in Lewiston, and what was she doing in Portland? Sandy walked over and hugged him tightly, as she always did. "We got it wrong somehow. Carol's suitcase and mine look identical. She must have had my ticket and I had hers, and we got on the wrong airplanes." John thought about it for a second. He knew Carol was 3 points above a bowling ball in IQ, but Sandy had always seemed on the bright side to him. And yet they had both gotten on the wrong airplane? Were there signs everywhere, announcements on loudspeakers? What was going on? And where was his wife, Carol? 4 days since she'd left for Reno. At least that's where he thought they'd gone. Like most men, John never paid much attention to what his wife was telling him. It was easier to just nod and go on about his business. Why they would go to some stupid bowling tournament where even if they came in first place, the prize couldn't pay for a hotel room was beyond comprehension. It was always assumed to be some kind of charity event, and John suspected that someone, somewhere, was getting money for the BMW. Oh well, they went bowling every year, and that made Carol happy. Then Carol would come home, and knowing that 4 days without sex meant John would be hornier than the 3-headed goat in the herd, would spend hours making sure he was happy. Of course, Carol was so horny herself that during the plane ride home, she sat bouncing and rubbing her thighs together. Her hands were on him as soon as they got into the car, and a few times they didn't even make it home. That vision brought a smirk to John's face. Carol may have been blunt, but she more than made up for it by being a very good and fun wife. She loved John, and she loved sex. Sometimes he wondered how she always stayed faithful. If John whispered something nasty in her ear, her eyelids would narrow, and if he kept it up for too long, she would go off like a firecracker. It was amazing. That said, he knew for a fact that Carol was faithful. She was almost never out of his sight. Except for bowling trips to Reno, Texas, Florida, somewhere every year. But more often than not, the destination was Reno. John had learned about her character when they first started dating, when they were on the dance floor, and by then had managed to have a few sex sessions and made some good progress. He had commented on her dress. By then they were well acquainted. She smiled when he said he liked it, and then gave him an amused look. The reaction was so interesting that he went on about how her beautiful large breasts swayed when she moved. A stunningly sexy woman. John loved it. Add to that the fact that she could cook so well that dinners were almost always almost magical, and she passionately hated dirt, so the house was always squeaky clean. It helped John to keep his mind on the house. John couldn't have an affair even if he wanted to. Carol never left him anything extra, unless she was away on one of her trips. As much as he liked Sandy, he knew he had to wait for Carol to come home. John reached down and grabbed the suitcase as it came down the conveyor belt and looked at the nameplate. It was Carol's suitcase, all right. He picked it up and flipped off the stupid little wheels, once again thinking he should be marketing the belt with the tow hitch he'd designed. In his mind, it was pretty clear. A wide belt with a clip, towable behind him, and hands free for necessities like cell phones and such. None of this walking from side to side with one arm stretched out behind his back. He'd even approached a marketing company with the idea, but they'd just laughed at him. He shook his head. Every time he saw one of those stupid wheeled suitcases, his idea popped into his head. That idea had to be worth millions of bucks. Then he thought he should call Carol. He didn't have a cell phone, so he looked around for a payphone. But there was none. So be it. He would call her from home. John turned his attention to Sandy. He had a bad habit of letting his thoughts wander in all directions. "Where would you like me to take you?" he asked, wanting to get away from her as soon as possible so he could get down to business. He just couldn't go another whole day doing nothing. "There's a flight to Lewiston tomorrow afternoon. I can catch it and be home by tonight. Can I stay with you until then?" She tilted her head and cast him an expectant look. John nodded. No problem. He and Carol had plenty of room and a spare bedroom. Darren and Sandy had stayed with them before, and John and Carol had visited several times. Sandy and his wife had gone to school together, and they remained lifelong friends. When Sandy got married, they met Darren, and he fit into their home as if he had known them all their lives. Darren was an inch taller and looked very attractive. John was heavier and had the beginnings of a middle-aged belly. But oddly enough, John almost always won their golf games, and his average bowling score was 15 pins higher than Darren's. Darren's hair was falling out, and John's was all native, and there was no end to the good-natured taunts about it. He looked at Sandy as they walked to the car in the parking lot. She was very pretty and in as good shape as Darren. She was dressed in a conservative business suit with a vest covering a simple white open-necked blouse. She'd looked the same for the dozen years he'd known her. Carol, on the other hand, had found 10 pounds somewhere and had rounded out even more than she had when he'd first met her. She had been a bit soft even then, and had gotten even softer over time. John didn't mind it one bit. In fact, he enjoyed rubbing her big breasts until Carol started giggling. Then she would reach out and grab his body, and Carol loved doing it. Probably because she knew John would reciprocate it. John shook his head, his thoughts swimming again. He cast a leering glance at Sandy, hoping she wouldn't notice he was in serious trouble, but she was watching the approach of a large airplane. He took the opportunity to look her over from head to toe. Sandy was smaller in bust than Carol and much slimmer. He often looked her over when Sandy and Darren came to visit. She was indeed an attractive woman. Sandy had caught him looking at her a few times, but only smiled lazily. Darren would occasionally glance at Carol, too, but there was no way Carol could hide her huge melons and had long since given up trying, so John was used to men looking at her. Walking to the car, John threw Carol's suitcase into the back seat and touched the key fob to unlock the doors. Sandy climbed into the car, and they pulled out of the parking lot and headed for his house by the river east of Portland. They drove in silence. As John carried his suitcase into the house, he asked her again how they ended up on the wrong airplanes. "We were talking on our cell phones. We just weren't paying attention, I guess. The gate was quite close. I took the ticket out of my suitcase and saw the gate number on the boarding pass. That's where I went." John nodded. Carol usually had her cell phone in her hand while talking to someone. Oh well, he grabbed a beer from the fridge and sank into a chair. Sandy knew the way, so there was no problem. She made her way to the spare bedroom and stayed there for about 30 minutes. Then she looked out the door. "John?" "Yes?" "Can I borrow one of Carol's robes or something?" "Why, don't you have—" "Oh, right. Maybe she has something in her closet?" "All I see are a few dresses. They're too big for me." "Okay. I need to go in there and look. Are you decent?" "Some guys think I look pretty decent," she giggled. "Just a second. I'll get a towel." John waited a moment, and Sandy opened the door, wrapping one of their bath towels tightly around her. He noticed that she had very nice legs, but tried his best not to show it. Digging through the closet, he realized that Carol didn't have any bathrobes. She did have a couple of nightgowns, but both hid nothing, so he couldn't give Sandy one of them. He picked one up and looked at it. It might as well have been clear plastic wrap. John grinned at the thought of giving it to Sandy, but decided against it. When he looked back at Sandy, he saw that she was holding a tight-fitting garment and grinned. John blushed and put the thing away. "How about one of my t-shirts?" he asked. "Sure, that should fit. I only have the clothes I'm wearing here." John knew Carol kept them in the hall closet, so he went to get one of them. When he returned with the shirt, she was peering out from behind the door, and he noticed that her hair was still damp. John could see her bare arm and shoulder. She smiled, then giggled as he handed her the shirt and walked back to his chair. He barely had time to sit down when the phone rang. It was Carol. "We did the stupidest thing ever," she giggled. "Yeah, I realized that when Sandy got off the plane instead of you," he told her. Darren was there, so I'll just stay with them until tomorrow. I'll be able to fly out in the morning. Where did you take Sandy? She's here taking a shower. I let her use one of your shirts. I couldn't find a robe. I don't have robes, I have nightgowns. Honey, those nightgowns are a little see-through, said John. Yeah, they probably are. But who knows? Maybe she'll like them. I bet you'd sure like them, wouldn't you? Carol chuckled. Yeah, I guess so. John laughed. So what time should I pick you up? About 1 o'clock. I already have my ticket. Good, I need to get Sandy to the airport before then so I can send her back to Darren. Okay. Well, I love you, honey, said Carol. I love you too, baby, he told her. Don't do anything I wouldn't do. She giggled again and hung up. What did she mean? He thought. He brushed the thought away, probably just a stupid joke. At that moment, Sandy came out. She had a small towel in her hands and was rubbing her hair furiously, making her breasts jiggle. Her t-shirt was a full 2 sizes too big for her, but covered her to mid-thigh. She sat down on the couch across from John and continued to rub her hair. John realized that the dark shadow he saw where the hem of the t-shirt crossed her legs was not a dark shadow. He felt his face redden and turned away. She caught his gaze and realized. Oh, sorry, John. She smiled and closed her legs, but it didn't help much. It didn't help that her breasts were pressing hard into the fabric either. John felt himself being drawn to Sandy. He tried his best to fight a losing battle, but finally turned on his side and put his leg up to try and hide the attraction. Am I making you uncomfortable, Johnny? Asked Sandy. Her voice suddenly changed. She had never called him Johnny. I'm sorry. It's just that Carol has been gone for 4 days now, and I don't know what to do. John fell silent and felt his face turn red. Oh, you poor thing. I'd better not tease you or I'd have to help you, wouldn't I? She hesitated. John looked up at her in surprise. Actually, you probably should. She stood up. The hem of her t-shirt was very high now. A wicked grin appeared on Sandy's face. John watched as her hands traveled down, her fingertips caught the bottom of the t-shirt and slowly pulled it up to her waist. She was naked. She smiled sweetly. John couldn't take his eyes off her lower body. He felt his face redden, and he was now completely aroused. This isn't a mistake, is it? John asked her. She shook her head and walked over to him. It seemed to John like it was all happening in slow motion. John just sat there staring at Sandy's body, unable to resist what she was doing. Carol wasn't kidding. You're about the same size as Darren, but twice as big. She sighed slightly, starting to play with him. Are you guys talking about our sizes? Asked John, surprised. Of course, that's just girl talk. Sandy, we shouldn't. I don't think it's a good thing, started to say John, but Sandy continued on her way. It was too late to protest. John started to have sex with her. It was very uncomfortable in the chair, so he leaned forward and picked her up, laying her on the carpet. Then he turned away from her when he realized what he'd just done. Besides, if Sandy was here and he was having sex with her, that meant that Carol was far away from here in Lewiston and possibly having sex with Darren. At that thought, he felt a flash of anger slam into him, and then the guilt returned. But there was no way in hell Carol would do such a thing. Sure, she teased him and was famous for her sexy jokes, but nothing more than that. Are you upset, John? I thought you'd like it since we've been friends for so long and we've never had sex. I've always been faithful to Carol, John told her with some bitterness in his voice. She blushed at his tone and sat up. I've been faithful to Darren too, but Carol and I were talking. She thought it would give you pleasure, and since we're all such good close friends... Her voice broke, and her hand instinctively rose to cover her breasts. I think you'd better get dressed. We shouldn't have... Okay. I don't understand why you're upset. It was just for fun, and you seemed ready a few minutes ago. I don't cheat. At least I haven't before. Really? That's interesting. Most men... Well, I think most do. Massage parlors and all that. Darren said you guys look like you're in a rut, and this will liven things up. Massage parlors? John had never been to one in his life. What did Darren say? I think it will only cause trouble. I'd better call Carol. Sandy left for the bedroom, and John heard the shower running again. He ran through a dozen options in his head on how to tell Carol what had just happened. Finally, he dialed the phone number. Hi, honey. How are you? Carol's happy voice answered almost instantly. Sandy told me you two were talking? Yeah. About what? Carol, you know exactly what about. About exchanging wives. Oh, about that. We got a little tipsy and got to talking. Thought it would be a good idea. I know you like her. Not a big deal. Plus, she told me that Darren sometimes goes to one of those massage parlors. And she thought if it was between friends, it would be a lot better. Well, I've never gone to any of them, and there's no difference. And what? Are you doing listening to Sandy? It was just girl talk. We talk about everything. I'm sorry, honey. I should have told you about it first, I guess. I think this will change everything. I love you, and I want to be with you. Good. I guess you're right. There's one more thing, honey. Sandy, It happened. There was a long silence. Already? We haven't even had dinner yet? Carol's voice changed. Honey, I'm so sorry. Everything came out of... Sandy came out of the bedroom. She was dressed again. Is that Carol? Let me talk to her. John held out the phone to her. Sandy sat down and John went into the bathroom and took a shower himself. They were still talking when he returned. Sandy looked at him and smiled. Okay, I'll tell him. I'll see you tomorrow. Then she hung up the phone. Is she angry? Asked John. She said it was her own fault and she doesn't blame you. John was relieved. He was worried about his wife's reaction, but he was even more upset about his own. Their life together had been too good to risk it over such foolishness. So what are you going to do? Asked Sandy. Nothing, I guess. We can't take it all back. It's no big deal, Johnny. Besides, I've wanted to have sex with you for a long time. She smiled at him. John blushed from the top of his head to the tips of his toes. A vision of her standing up and exposing her lower body flashed through his mind, and he felt himself starting to react to the thought. He tried to banish the thought, but it was too late. You liked it, didn't you? Sandy's voice took on a sultry tone. Well, yes, of course I did, but we can do it again if you want, but it's too late, so why not? She grinned. I can't. I don't think. Carol won't mind. Why wouldn't Carol mind? John felt a sudden queasiness in his stomach. We were at the tournament last year. Darren flew in. John stared at her. Do you know how annoyed Carol gets when you tease her with all kinds of sexy talk? John knew it well about his wife. He used it often in their own bedroom, and he teased Carol to get a reaction out of her, even in public, and often when Darren and Sandy were around. She didn't do that, and you guys didn't. Yeah. United States. Darren started teasing her for fun, and we all got carried away. She couldn't think of a way to tell you, so this is her way of making it up to you. She didn't tell you. That somehow didn't sit right with him. Oh, yes, she did. John felt as if his world was falling apart. Carol, with Darren, and almost a whole year ago he had no idea. He looked at Sandy for a few seconds. I wouldn't mind another session with you, Johnny. It won't matter anymore. She smiled and stood up, heading toward him. Sandy? No way in hell. I've already made one stupid mistake and I'm not going to make it worse. He raised his hands, palms outstretched, to stop her. A hurt expression appeared on Sandy's face, but she said nothing. John turned and went to his bedroom, closing the door. He lay awake for a long time, half expecting Sandy to come in, but she didn't. The next day he drove Sandy to the airport, and she was silent until they arrived at the venue. Please don't tell Carol any of what I told you, okay? she said finally. John found that odd. Carol had always been open and honest with him, and there was no way she was having an affair. John nodded, intending to do just that. It was obvious that he and his wife needed to talk. He watched Sandy walk up the steps to the airport lobby, and after half an hour he saw Carol come out and look around. She spotted their car in the parking lot, smiled, and waved. Then she quickly walked over to him and gave him a big hug. The drive home was frustrating. Carol was strangely silent. Finally, after turning off the car in front of the house, he asked her bluntly, "How? Did you end up on the wrong airplane?" "I don't know exactly. I didn't even realize until we were halfway there and I heard the captain announce it." "And what happened there?" "Nothing. We were talking, visiting, watching TV." "Just talked, that's all?" "Yeah, pretty much everything." At those words, she turned her face away. "I bet he wanted to do that." "Yeah, he wanted to. It was all a mistake. Sandy and I already talked about it, that's all. I'm sorry, honey." Then she began to cry. John felt even more confused. Why would she cry? Perhaps because Suddenly he felt miserable. "Don't cry, baby. I don't know what was wrong with all that either. After Sandy told me about you and Darren in Reno, I didn't know what to think." "Darren? In Reno? Darren never came to Reno." She looked at him puzzled. "Last year, she told me." "Darren didn't come last year?" "Didn't come? The three of you never had sex there?" "No, he wasn't even there. All I did was play bowling and a little bit of arcade." John was confused. "But Sandy said he was?" "Well, he wasn't." A confused expression appeared on Carol's face, and John realized she wasn't lying. "Now I don't understand." John now realized that Sandy had lied to him. But why? At the time, he thought he had figured it out. Just to make him think everything was okay? What had she said? "Don't tell Carol what I told you?" He realized he didn't know Darren and Sandy as well as he thought he did. "Did Darren try to do anything while you were there?" "Yes. Besides, he kept looking at me." "What do you mean he was looking at you?" "I was only wearing Sandy's tee. It was too small, so I only wore the top part." "It's okay. He always looks at me like that. The way you look at Sandy." "Just fine. But I don't look at Sandy," said John sarcastically. "Yes, you do. I see it all the time. Were you only wearing a tiny pajama top? Did he see you?" "Oh, it covered me. Besides, I kept it on tight." "That's it?" "Yeah, just him talking to me. You know how I do it." "Really? And what did he say?" "He was teasing me that he liked my outfit, trying to get me excited, but I knew what he was doing." "So, what did Sandy do?" asked Carol before John could ask the rest of the questions that were swirling around in his head. Guilt came over him, and he decided to be honest. "She was wearing one of my shirts and she just pulled it up. I tried to stop, but it just happened." "It's okay, honey. We should have talked first. I'm sorry." She kissed his neck lightly and they stood silent for a long time. "I need to take a shower," she said, and let him go and headed for the bathroom. Later, Carol came out of the bedroom. She pressed herself against him and he realized what she wanted. After only a few minutes, he undressed Carol and made love to her. Afterward, she pressed herself against him with pleasure. "Johnny?" Her voice was very quiet. John was instantly wary. Carol rarely called him that. "What, baby?" "Am I better than Sandy?" Her voice sounded a little timid. "Much better, you bet. It was over so fast it almost didn't happen." "Really? I'm sorry it wasn't good for you." Then she giggled, rolled over onto her back, and curled up. "I really thought you wouldn't. But it's okay. I'm happy I'm better than Sandy, and you're much better than Darren." She spoke softly, almost in a dream. John shook his head. Yes, he was dumber than a rock. But he did love this woman. He turned to face her, put his arms around her, and reached up to gently stroke her breasts. Carol relaxed, sinking into a contented snore. And then it hit him. What had she just said? The end! Subscribe to my channel. Thank you!